This little handsome guy right here is Colton. Colton's 3 years old. He loves riding his bike. His favorite cartoon is Blaze the Monster Machine. His favorite superhero is Batman. His favorite color is blue. And basketball is his favorite sport. But most importantly, Colton's my son. Now, if you'll give me a few minutes of your time, I want to tell you the story about how I met my son. November 2014, I was a 32-year-old man with no children. So I thought. One Thursday after work, I got a call from a number that I didn't recognize. It was a woman on the phone named Ashley that I hadn't seen or talked to in about a year and a half. Ashley says, "Hey Brian, this is Ashley. I thought it was only right that I call and let you know that you have a son. His name is Colton and he's 9 months old." So at first, I did what most people would have done. I took it as a joke. But she was serious. She told me that she had been in jail and that Colton had been in the custody of her sister Christian and her boyfriend Brandon. She went on to tell me that she didn't want anything from me. She just thought it was only right that I knew that I had a son. She also gave me the telephone number for a lady named Lynn who worked for the Kentucky Child and Family Services. The next day I contacted the Kentucky Child and Family Services. I left a few messages and finally got a call back from the lady named Lynn. It was at this point that I learned the circumstances that led to Ashley's arrest and the reason why Colton was in her sister's custody. Ashley had a serious drug addiction, and she was using heroin and other prescription drugs during her pregnancy. She also informed me that Christian and Brandon had their hopes set on raising Colton as their own child. She gave me the next court date, which was in about a week. On the day of court, I showed up with my sister Sharon, and we met Lynn in the courthouse lobby. Lynn tried to introduce us to Christian and Brandon, but they took one look at me and retreated outside to cry together. I went outside to talk to him anyway. I wanted to let him know that I wasn't there to hurt anyone. I was there to do what was right. I wanted to ask the judge for a DNA test, and if that DNA test confirmed that Colton was my son, I wanted to step up and be his father. After court, I asked if I could see him. They finally agreed and we met at the McDonald's. They walked in the door with this beautiful baby boy, and it was at that moment I knew I was looking at my son. Sure, I hadn't taken a DNA test yet, but I felt it. I mean, it's hard to explain, but I knew it. It was like I had seen his face before. December 13th, the DNA test results confirmed what I had already known from the moment I laid eyes on him. Colton was my son. The next month, we were back in court, but this time I was back as the confirmed biological father. The judge asked me what were my wishes. My reply was simply, "Your Honor, I want my son." The judge replied by asking the Kentucky Child and Family Services why my son wasn't with me already. They told him that they were working on getting my child acclimated to me first, and then he would be transferred into my custody. After about 2 months of weekend visits, I contacted the Kentucky Child and Family Services, or at least I tried to. When I finally did get a hold of him, the lady Brandy basically gave me the runaround about needing to talk to her supervisor. She said she was going to have a meeting with her supervisor that Friday about placing my son into my custody. I called and couldn't get an answer. Finally, after 3 more Fridays, I got an answer. It was at this point they informed me that the Child and Family Services case had been transferred from Carroll County, Kentucky to Meade County, Kentucky. They had transferred the case without even telling me anything. It seems like for some reason they intended on keeping me in the dark. After this, I hired a lawyer, but this guy just drug his feet until it was time to do some actual work. Then he informed me that he couldn't represent me because there was a conflict of interest. An associate of his was representing my son's mother in the case. So I got a new lawyer. This one was highly recommended, a guy named Ryan Beck. This guy just wanted money, money, money. I mean, this guy hit me up for money time after time, and we hadn't even stepped into court yet. I don't think he actually intended on getting me into court fast. I honestly think he was just going to try to see how many hours he could charge me for. So after a few months of hounding this guy to get a court date, I told my son's aunt that I wouldn't bring him back until we got a new court date. And what do you know? I got a letter in the mail 2 days later from the court telling me we had a new court date. But this new court date came with a price. The county attorney, Nick Marsh, decided to terminate my visitation rights until we went back to court. This is the same county attorney who up until this day has yet to return one of my phone calls to his office, before or after this incident. So I had to wait a month to find out when I was going to be allowed to start seeing my son again. Finally, our day in court had arrived. It was time to see what my lawyer was made of. In court, he basically watched as my son's aunt spoke and never gave me a chance to speak. So we left court with the same weekend visits reestablished. My son's aunt tried to get those weekend visits cut back to every other weekend, claiming that the highway rides were causing my son to have nightmares. The judge denied her request to cut my visitations back to every other weekend. It was also at this court date that I was served paperwork stating that Colton's aunt was petitioning the court for full rights to him. Not because I was unfit, not because I couldn't afford him, not because I was unstable, but all because her and her boyfriend had been unsuccessful in their attempts at having their own child. Whether or not I could provide the best life for my child never even came into question. She's taught my son to call her mommy, her boyfriend daddy, and to call me Daddy Brian. I've asked her time and time to stop this practice, but she continues, and she tells me that she doesn't have to answer to me. One evening I brought my son back from the weekend visitation, and I got in an argument with them about them teaching my son to call them mommy and daddy. Things got pretty heated and I decided to drive off. Once I got out into traffic, Christian's boyfriend Brandon yells out of the window and calls me the N-word. This was while my son was in the vehicle with them. As soon as I got home, I called and made a report with the Kentucky Child and Family Services about that and some other unsanitary conditions. They didn't return my call for 3 months, and even then they didn't do anything. Fast forward to today. Colton's mother is back in jail and has lost custody of her other children once again. She's back on drugs and wishes to sign her rights to Colton over to her sister in order to be relieved of the child support she's never paid. At this point, I feel like just taking my son away from these people, but the system doesn't favor fathers, and I'm no good to my son behind bars. All I want to do is be a dad. That's all. I don't ask for much. I just don't want to be a part-time dad to a full-time son. I made this video for 2 reasons. 1, so I could spread my story and put the pressure on the courts to do the right thing. 2, because I honestly don't have the money to get the type of lawyer I need. I need a lawyer who's not from that area, and that costs money. It's sad that you have to pay more for people to care more, but it's the reality. I don't want anybody to feel obligated to donate. But if you've listened to my story and my story has moved you in any way, hit the share button. That's worth $1 million to me. I hate asking people for help, but this is the most important reason I've ever had to need help. If any of you have seen me with my son, you know what type of bond we have and how much pride I take in being a father. All I want to do is be a father, but thanks for taking the time to listen to the story about how I met my son. God bless you.